Hi, welcome to You Belong Here, the place to be for positive stories of immigrant women from all around the world. You will meet some inspiring women sharing their success, challenges, and how they are living meaningful American dreams beyond professional and financial success. You may even identify with some of their stories. I'm Portia Chen Silverberg. This production of You Belong Here is coming to you from Palo Alto, California. My guests today are Minh No and Sara Lomelin Velten. Minh is a philanthropic executive deeply committed to advancing social justice, human rights, and equity for children, women, and families experiencing economic hardship. Sara is a philanthropic leader who firmly believes everyone can be a philanthropist, and she is passionate about helping the Latino community reach its full potential. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
So happy that you're here, and I'm so looking forward to hear your stories. Maybe we'll just start with you, Sara.
Sure.
Tell us what brought you to this wonderful country and what circumstances, where you're from, all of that.
Perfect. I'm from Mexico City. I have been here in this country for 21 years.
Wow.
Yes. What brought me here was higher education. Never thought I was going to stay this long. The idea was to go, for a couple of years to Boston, Massachusetts, and then go back to Mexico. So my husband and I just got married and moved to Massachusetts, and then after those 2 years, he got a job in the Bay Area, and we moved here, and 21 years later, we're still here. My 3 children were born here, and yeah.
This is home.
This is home.
Great, great. And you, Minh?
Well, I was born in Paris and then moved here as a young child. My mom came for work, and so we joined her, and we thought it would be a short-term stay, and it became a longer-term stay.
Wow, so you have that in common. Mm-hmm. That's great. And both of you, tell us what you do for fun and what you do for your day job.
Well, my day job and my fun are one and the same. I have given up on work-life balance, and I've realized the only way to do it is to curate your life in a way where you just do what you love, and then it makes it
beautiful,
all the easier. So I spend most of my days in philanthropy and nonprofit. I am the executive director for a local nonprofit, and I sit on several boards, and I'm just focused on the causes that matter the most to me.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that you have given up on work-life balance, because I think it's a myth, right? It just doesn't exist.
It's a total myth.
Right?
It's a myth,
Right?
yes.
You feel the same way?
Yes, I mean, I have 3 teenagers, so there's never a dull moment for me. But I agree with you. I think that it's why I do what I do. I was an entrepreneur. I worked in finance, but then after we moved here, and this is my second stint in the Bay Area.
Wow.
I lived for about 7 years in Texas, in the in
Wow.
between San Francisco and the Bay Area. But when I came back here 8 years ago, I really wanted to find a job that was meaningful, that was going to feed my soul as much as my day. So that is why I started working in philanthropy. And as you, it's like, it's my fun and my work are one and the same.
Yeah. I just feel that we are all so blessed right here. The 3 of us are so blessed to have found what we're passionate about, what makes us tick, and being able to do it for work and for fun, right? But a lot of people, especially immigrants, really don't know a whole lot about local nonprofits. We may have heard of the large international nonprofits that everyone can name, but there's so many great organizations such as yours and yours that maybe not everyone knows about. So I'm actually really interested in exploring with you what it takes to get involved with local communities. And for someone, and this actually I think applies to you too, Minh, because you came from the for-profit world, right?
Yes.
So both of you are sector switchers, as we call you in the business, right? So you both went from business into the nonprofit philanthropy world. So I would love to hear what are your thoughts on or advice for people who are wanting to make that transition, and furthermore for people who are immigrants who really didn't grow up in this country, know a whole lot about our sector, because we know our sector is so unique in the world, right? No one else, no other country has the kind of sector that we do. So I really love to hear some advice and some wisdom from you.
Well, you know, my perspective on this is that if more immigrants don't know about the nonprofit sector and they don't know about philanthropy, it's because as a sector, we haven't done enough to outreach, to communicate, and most importantly, to be inclusive. It is the same principle that applies whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. For-profit corporations don't wait for customers to find them. They have to go out and they have to create that pipeline. And I think for us as a sector, we are doing great work in the community, and we are doing a tremendous amount of work in terms of creating impact. But along with that, we have a responsibility to include more people, to include their voices, and to really put them at the center of our work. And that starts with us being more inclusive. And I think if we did that, we would find that more immigrants, more people of color, and other communities start to notice the work that we do and find their own ways to engage.
Completely
I
agree.
totally agree, and also I would like to add that we need to meet people where they are.
Yes.
Right.
Very cool.
You know, I work for the Latino Community Foundation, so there is just a little research about reaching donors of color, and the reason is because we are completely invisible to mainstream philanthropy. I spent, a lot of time last year and this year traveling all over the country because everybody wants to jump on the Latino train, right? we want these Latinos with money to give money.
Right.
But the way to reach out to them, to attract them, is not the way they're doing it. It's not the, let's throw a Cinco de Mayo party with big sombreros and people will feel included. That is not the way. So a lot of people have said, we're giving to you. Nobody asked us before. We don't go and ask people to give, to be engaged. So I totally agree with you, Minh, that we as a sector, we need to do better.
And I think just following up on that, it starts with a deep respect for the community. And that's actually what's missing. We see it all the time. Our way of connecting is through some kind of a culinary party or some kind of an event, or it's marking what we consider a holiday. But for me, by respect, I mean actually listening to the community, having the work and the philanthropy be driven by their needs, and having the measure of success defined by the community and not by the donor or investor. Once you start doing that, I think that's when you see inclusiveness. That's when you start to see more people get engaged, and that's when you start to see members of the community, and perhaps even members of the community who have before felt unheard, start to come out and lend their voice, because it's really important to feel seen. And we do so much work in the community, and yet so often I have the sense that we don't see the community.
Totally. And opening, the conversation, the dialogue between the nonprofits and the funders and the donors. And we, I think, here in the Bay Area is changing, but we have so much work to do. We were just talking that it is pretty ridiculous, and it's not okay that the big philanthropic dollars just trickle down tiny little bits into the Asian American community, into the Latino community, the LGBTQ community is not okay, and we need to change that. And we as a sector need to change that and stop, doing the funding dictated by the funder instead of from the community.
That's so true. As you know, I ran an organization that was a coalition of nonprofits, business, and government. And my passion was always to advocate and encourage more community involvement from people who have not been traditionally been involved. So increasing diversity is so important. And I couldn't agree with both of you more. And I'm really actually curious to hear more about the program that you're leading at the Latino Community Foundation.
Yes, and for example, I think I didn't answer your question in how, to get more people involved. We started 5 years ago one of our main initiatives, which is the Latino Giving Circle Network. We have a network of 16 giving circles in California. But when we first started, it was difficult because, a lot of first generation immigrants, we come from with countries with very corrupt governments and institutions. So we don't trust. So we had to build that trust from the get-go and say, here in this country, this works. The money that you are going to invest in a nonprofit organization will get to the final, to the final user, to the families that need it the most. So there was a lot of, changing the narrative, being very transparent with the people, and just, involving them in the whole grant making process. So a Giving Circle, the way they work, it's a group of people that comes together in a very social way to find a cause and to pull the resources and the time and their talents and to give, to pull together money to give to a nonprofit. And what we're doing is we're getting these new philanthropic dollars into the local Latino-led nonprofits.
Great. That's wonderful. And one of my interests for You Belong Here Foundation is actually to start giving circles for immigrant women. So on one hand, we can help to educate them on the opportunities available, create a new community, bring all of us together, and also, in addition to looking for certain ethnic causes or different giving opportunities defined by that, I think it's just really wonderful to really have all of us come together, all of us who are foreign born, right? And I'm curious, what do you think about the term immigrant? Do you have a certain image, or do you think people have a certain perception when we say immigrants or immigrant women?
You want to go first?
I think it's interesting because I tend to take a sociological perspective on many things, and the term immigrant in itself actually has very little meaning to me or value. But what I do find interesting is how people get categorized and what that means in the context of a community or a society. I'm struck by how some groups of individuals, based on how they arrive here, are considered immigrants, whereas some groups get to be expats.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And it's really the very same thing, but the word is shifted, and you create a separation so that you can create a value separation. That's the part that's interesting to me. It's less the word itself and more about how it's selectively applied.
And especially now.
Yes.
I think now, you
Exactly.
say the word immigrant and it carries such a weight. And you know, I am from Mexico, so I'm one of the Mexicans, right? A lot of people, I remember when I was in Texas, somebody asked me, actually it was my son, that said, this kid at school called you a Mexican. And I said, I am a Mexican. And I'm a very proud Mexican. I'm very proud to be Mexican. And I think that is what we need to do. And that is why we do at the Latino Community Foundation is, you know what, feel proud of your roots, feel proud of your culture. And we are changing the narrative of how Latinos and what Latinos are. And you know, when I talk that everybody can be a philanthropist, yes, Latinos are givers. We're not takers. We're philanthropists. We have been giving for generations, to our family, to our families back home, to the church, to the schools. So it's changing that narrative and also changing the narrative about immigration.
Yes.
And I think in the nonprofit sector, this is something I see. We need to talk more and highlight the stories of other kinds of philanthropists. And we also have to think carefully, once again, about our language. You know, this is probably one of the most progressive, inclusive sectors that are out there, but I still see it all the time. It's interesting at, you know, my organization, we engaged thousands of volunteers, but we've struggled with engaging volunteers from, you know, communities we serve. And I started to think about it, and I said, we're going about this all wrong. Have we actually talked to members of the community? Because when we do, we realize that's all they do is volunteer and engage. So this idea of asking them to go and become something, to give, to do something, that's already happening. And so we use words to make things, you know, to give them special category of, if you do this, then you become that, when the reality is we need to see the philanthropy that already exists. We need to see the community engagement that already exists. And we have to value it. And every study reaffirms this, that people know what they would consider major philanthropists, but if you look at people, it is always individuals with less means who give a greater percentage of what they have. That is true philanthropy. You are giving more of what you have and what you cannot dispose of. And, you know, if you take that metric, the philanthropic pyramid should actually be inversed.
That's such a good point. And it goes back to what you said earlier about being respectful of our community, communities that we're reaching out to, right? It's so fascinating. And on the word, back to the word immigrant, I actually really, really contemplated and struggled with whether or not I use the word immigrant to describe my mission, to reach out and work with immigrant women creating this new community because of the negative connotation. And then I realized, and I thought about all these other labels, right? Expats, foreign-born Americans, new Americans. I mean, there's just so many possibilities. But I chose immigrant in the end because I feel that immigrants make this country great. We are immigrants, and I'm proud to be an immigrant. And it's really important that we do own it and be proud of it. And the same goes for philanthropy. You're absolutely right. There are communities that are already giving, and their 10% is so much more significant than someone who has the resources. And on the other hand, the definition of philanthropy does need to be retweaked, right? Because my previous show, I had an executive director of a nonprofit. She said her advice is just go out and do something. You don't have to do something big. You can volunteer your time to file for a nonprofit or blow up balloons for a birthday party for the kids they serve. There's just so many different ways. And so I would love to hear what are some ways that you can encourage the immigrants who have been involved with volunteering mostly in their own communities, at their kids' schools or their church, or, you know, how do they extend outside of that circle?
Well, you know, for me, it's not retweaking the word, but going back to the roots of the word philanthropy, which is, you know, love for humanity. I think if the moment we see it like that, it's just do something with love. And it can be,
so
you know, it
great.
can be giving your time,
Right.
offering your talents, taking a Saturday to go and build a database for a nonprofit, or, you know, go and register people to vote. Just be engaged. Like, I think, you know, especially now, it's so important that all of us get engaged with our local community. I mean,
Yes.
with the school boards, with the with our neighborhood associations.
Right.
We need to start somewhere, and I think it's just doing it with love. Is seeing
love
each
that.
other, you know, to the eyes, seeing more our similarities than our differences.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that goes back to what you said earlier about just, I think, really embracing immigrants or people of color from our sector, right? Because a lot of times people might feel intimidated or feel like they're not being invited to the table. So they need to just go out and raise their hands, or just, you know, and I think we have the responsibility, this nonprofit sector, to do more outreach and be more welcoming and meet people where they are, as you said, Sara. And I think for the immigrants who are interested to give back to their communities, they may create their own table if they're not invited, right? I think that that's important too. I think it's the ultimate cross-sector collaboration, or just all different communities coming together. And the other issue, I think, is the issue of leadership, board members and nonprofit leaders, to have more people of color, and especially from my perspective, to have more immigrants to bring their perspective and their contribution to our sector. But I know we'll talk about that another day because we're all very
We
passionate.
could talk about that all day.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
we can, right?
Yes.
And I must just say, again, I express my gratitude for the blessing that I feel every day for having discovered this amazing world of nonprofits in this country. It's just so life-changing and transformative. So how about, as we wind down and wrap up, do you have anything that you think you can offer to people who may not know about immigrants?
I think in terms of something that often gets overlooked, and the one thing I would say is, first and foremost, an immigrant is an individual. And I say this because so much of our society, we group people. We group immigrants, we group women, we group people of color. We basically group various minority people, and we see them as a collective, and they're not afforded their individuality. But there's nothing more powerful or American than the democratic system, and that really has started with this recognition that people are individuals with their own voice, with their own agency. And unfortunately, for the most part, unless you belong to dominant culture in this country, you are not an individual. And so the first thing I would share, it's not as specific about how we are or what we do. It's the fact that wherever I come from, wherever you come from, we can be very proud of our culture, our heritage, but from wherever we came, we arrive as individuals. And I think that's important in terms of being able to connect with each other one-on-one at a human level, is to be able to see that person as a freestanding individual that I have to get to know and that I can't make assumptions about based on knowing anyone else.
Yes.
That's great. That's really helpful.
Totally. And also, to be open and to be ready and to embrace the diversity, because the things you can learn from a 5-minute conversation with someone from another culture, another country, is so enriching. And I think there is no other country in the world that we have the opportunity to do that. And especially, in this area that you are in the supermarket and you are hearing, 5 different languages.
Right.
I love it. I mean, it's an opportunity to learn every single day from somebody new.
And I wish we had time. I'm so curious about your experience in Texas versus here.
Oh, that's a whole
maybe
other.
that's another conversation.
conversation.
Because boy, we are also very blessed to be here in California, in Northern California, in the Bay Area. I thank you both so much. And now, Minh, Sara, and I would love to hear from you. We talked about so many interesting things today. I'm curious, what's one thing that resonated with you? And what actions are you inspired to take? Please go to youbelongherefoundation.org and leave a comment. You Belong Here is committed to infusing a plethora of positive immigrant women's stories in our community. Stay tuned for future shows. I am Portia Chen Silverberg. Thanks for watching. And remember, you belong here. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your patience. And I'm so grateful.
Whether you're different, same ignorant or intelligent, whether you tell the truth, lie or embellish it, whether you live in gratitude or for the hell of it, it doesn't really matter, it's still one single fellowship. Whether you've been lustful or living celibate, whether you're an optimist or only see the negative, whether you're dead broke or rich from inheritance, doesn't really matter, we're made of the same sediment. Whether you got a family or single parenting, or you're Asian, African, European or American, whether you pray to God or atheist is irrelevant, cause what you got inside is the same, it's all your preference.